Our next speaker is Roland Cristo. He is being sponsored by NFSS, which stands for the National Finch and Softbilled Society. They have a booth in the vendor hall. It'd be great if you could visit him. I'm looking here at his bio. It's such an honor to have Roland return to AFA. He's been in birds probably as long as he's been born, as he was born. If he really wrote the bio that was deserved of him, it would take up this entire program. So, Roland, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I asked this young lady if she was showing pictures of her dog up there. I said, dogs are good people. And I said, yeah, put your husband and dog in a cloud for a day and see which one's glad to see you when you open the door. I have to ask another question for you folks who are here. It's a pleasure to have followed Sally's presentation. I have a lot of respect for Sally and what she does. I couldn't do it. Not from day one on small birds like that. The only other lady that I have known that's ever done anything close to that was a lady named Marilyn Paul in Orangevale, California. She used to raise day one Cape doves, and that's a chore. The other question, could you dive lights up for a minute, please? The other question is, all you folks out here, if you couldn't have the birds you have, say because there was a law or something, would you raise English sparrows and starlings? Would you raise your hand? Okay, thank you. My wife is responsible for me being here. She's the one. She's the one feeding all the birds with the babies and feeding all the birds that don't have babies. And that's a lot of work. I mean, we have 3 pair of shamas with babies and a pair on eggs, and I've got lories on eggs and lories on babies and taracos on eggs. And when I was asked to be here, I talked it over with the wife and she said, go ahead and do it. I'll take care of the birds. And she's responsible for this presentation. She did all the work putting it together. Softbill birds. Singing, breeding softbill songbirds. Songbirds are the most popular birds, cage birds, kept in the world. Very, very popular. Now, in Southeast Asia, all through there, and they raise shamas, dial thrushes, and white-eyes and larks, and they also trap them and teach them to sing songs. And it's a very, very big thing with them in Southeast Asia. And they also breed the shamas for song and for tail length. And there was a man, his name is Joseph, in Singapore that was offered $20,000 for one shama because of his song. And that's American dollars. And its tail length. Where do I point this at? I need to move.
You don't point it anyway. All you got to do is hit it. Right there, the arrow.
Okay. This picture here was taken by Steve Duncan in Singapore. And a lot of you people know Steve. Steve is a guy about this tall, nice guy. And he said when he observed this, tears came to his eyes. He said, how much those people enjoyed the birds. And they do. This is a shama. That's a dial thrush. Both of those are in the same genus. They have cages. The cages are made. See this cage right here? Taller cage is made for skylarks, because when skylarks go to sing, they start singing when they're flying up. And so if the bird starts flying up, it starts singing. Once it gets up there, it continues to sing. They have these every weekend in Southeast Asia. Everywhere. They have them even in LA. This same type of setup, very similar to this, is also done in Brazil with different species of birds. Bicudas, which are the great-billed seed finch, and the curios, which are the lesser seed finch, and spurios and cardinals and ultramarine grosbeaks. In fact, Brazil has the largest avicultural club in the world, which amounts to 30,000 people. They own their own buildings, have their own meetings and their own shows. With the bicudas and the lesser seed finch, the great-billed and lesser seed finch, they work with the government, because those birds are protected in Brazil. They work with the government, and they get permits from the government to breed these things and teach them trunk. And the government's all for it. They'd rather have that than have them go out and trap them illegally. This is a Shama. This is an Arplace. Shamas, by most people's thoughts and by mine, are the best songbird in the world. There is no songbird any better than a Shama. And they're mimics. And what makes them the best songbird in the world is an example. When a mockingbird mimics, it'll do 3 times what it mimicked. 1, 2, 3. And then the next thing it mimics, it'll do 3 times. And lyrebirds will do the same thing. You hear a lyrebird, which is supposedly the best mimic. A lyrebird can sound exactly like a chainsaw. When a Shama mimics, it takes the song it mimics. It breaks that song up and puts it in different portions of that song into different portions of its own repertoire. And it's very hard to tell it's mimicked. Gorgeous birds, and they're insectivores. They're sexually dimorphic. That's the female. Some females are almost as dark as males. You don't see them very much. When you first see them, sometimes you'll mistake them for a male. They don't have the clear shine that a male has. We feed these birds with a high feeder at about, I'd say it's 5 foot, and a low feeder at about 18 inches. And the one reason why songbirds, especially insectivore songbirds, are very, very pugnacious. And when you introduce a hen to a male, you better keep an eye on it. It's that thing called aviculture. Keep an eye on it, because he could kill her in a minute. If he's ready to go and she's not, he'll beat up on her and I can kill her in 5 minutes. Okay. That's with most insectivore songbirds. First off, I forgot an area there, and I'm sorry, folks, but let's define what a soft-billed songbird is. Soft-bill is strictly an avicultural term. It's not used anywhere else. It's not used in ornithology or anywhere else. It's a soft-bill term. Soft-bills include birds in many different families and orders, but mainly the passiforms. Most finches and most soft-bills are in the passiform group, and most of the birds in the world are in the passiform group. Soft-bills are called soft-bills because they're either fruit eaters, nectar eaters, or insect eaters, or they could be omnivorous, like a crow is a soft-billed bird. It's an omnivorous bird. They eat their food, all soft items. Fruit eater eats soft fruit. A crow eats frogs, lizards, mice, all soft. The basic thing that really defines what a soft-billed bird is, in my mind at least, is Richard Martin's book. Unlike most seed eaters, I'm quoting this, soft-bills feed their atrisal babies by placing fresh, undigested items in the beak. and not by regurgitation. In other words, if they catch a cricket and they bite the head off and the legs off, that body does not get eaten by them and then transferred by regurgitation to the chick. It goes directly into the chick's mouth. That's the definition of a softbill. The shamas, I think there's 12 subspecies. Like I said, they can be very aggressive. Once they build that nest, once she's built a nest, and it just takes 2 to 3 days to build, that's it. It starts laying eggs, and then the pressure's off for that year with the male. You won't have any problems normally with the male at that point. They will do 3 to 4, sometimes 5 clutches, 3 to 5 eggs in a clutch. They come off very early. The shamas are from Southeast Asia, Singapore and in there. This is a snowy crown robin chat. These are from Central Africa. Very, very closely related to the shamas, to the birds in that genus, in a different genus, but very closely related. They're not sexually dimorphic. Males and females look exactly the same. You can tell a little bit by the protrusion between the upper eye and the beak. In the male, it tends to protrude out a little bit, and it does that on most males of any species. Sometimes they're a little bigger, sometimes they're not. Sometimes I've seen hens bigger. These are fed with a high and low feeder. These are white-eared bulbuls. Bulbuls are basically fruit eaters. These are 2 subspecies in this particular species. They come from eastern Iran, clear across Pakistan into India, western India. The people in those countries go crazy over these things. These things, I think the first one I bought 8 years ago or so, I paid $50 for. They go for $250 a piece. When these things go to nest, babies come off very, very early. All these birds you're seeing here as softbills come off very, very early. I will when I'll get to that. These are red-vented bulbuls. They're from India into Thailand. I think there's 7 subspecies, 8 subspecies. They're monomorphic. Monomorphic means you can't tell the sexes by color or by size. They're kept for songbirds in Southeast Asia by the hundreds. In fact, I was looking at a video on the internet where a guy was keeping bulbuls, and he had so many mutations it was unbelievable. These are red-crested cardinals. We go to a different continent for these. These are from Brazil and Argentina. There's no 5 color mutations, no subspecies. They're not sexually dimorphic, they're monomorphic. In Brazil, they raise these in 2.5 foot, 3 foot cages. I have never been able to get one to go in anything less than 6 foot. And any people that I'm talking to are saying the same thing. In Brazil, they have 5 mutations of that bird, and the mutations amount to different colored head, different colored, they have a pearly, different colored body. The gray on the body is a different color. They're doing fantastic things with these things. It's unbelievable. This was once a very inexpensive bird in American aviculture until it was put on the CITES appendix list. I can remember picking these birds up for $12 a piece. That's how cheap they were. How come the song is not on this one? Sir? And it wasn't on the last two. I will try to.
For some reason, there's three of them that the song didn't come through on. For some
Okay,
reason.
well, just go back to that one because it's got a good song.
Yeah, me too.
The songs on that one.
Yeah, it's not showing the little sound. It's not.
Where's the sound thing?
Well, it's not supposed to say it's not there. The last
Okay.
one has a little.
Anyway, it may show it up when I get into the breeding sequences. These are from Asia, and they live mid mountain and high mountain areas. There's 7 or 8 subspecies, difference in color. So you can't, when you start looking at a male and a female, and you say, well, that one's lighter than that one, so that this one, the darker one, brighter one, may be a male and a lighter. That's not necessarily true. That also happens within the subspecies. I'm sorry if I keep moving back and forth. These now sell for $500 a bird, and that's probably on the cheap end. They're good nesters. They'll raise their babies pretty good. It's when the babies come off the nest that you start having problems. This is Magpie Strikes. These aren't my birds. They're at my house, but I don't own them. These are owned by Houston Zoo. They're on breeder loan. Very, very nice birds. A long tail, and when they sit on that perch like the one on the right's doing, that tail will go back and forth like a pendulum on a clock. Very boisterous birds. When they raise babies, the babies will sometimes help raise the next clutch. This is a bird, a species that I tried to find ultramarines. These are from South America, Central America. Ultramarine grosbeaks. This is a blue-black grosbeak. Ultramarines are used in Brazil as songbirds. This bird here is closely related to them. It took me 5 years to find these birds coming through quarantine. And when they first started coming through quarantine, they were $150 a piece, and the young lady running quarantine decided, no, that was too cheap. So by the time I bought them, I paid considerably more money for them. And, at my age, it's worth being able just to have the privilege to work with them. They're sexually dimorphic, several subspecies based on the blue coloring intensity of the male. There's the female. These are set up in 3-foot cages. I have not bred them. I've gotten eggs off them, but the eggs weren't fertile. And when I breed these, the males will be removed from the hens. As soon as she is set, within 3 to 4 days, the male will be removed. No need for the male anymore. This is black crested finches, Pygmy Cardinals, whatever you want to call them. They're sexually dimorphic. Male on the right with the big. It's only 2 people in the United States that I believe have these, and that's me and the young lady sitting over here on the aisle. They lay 2 to 3 eggs. Can't hear the song, and I'm sorry about that, but they're good singers. It's not a high song, but it's a real good song. When I moved the males from hen to hen, and these are raised in 3-foot by 16 by 16 cages. I moved the male from hen to hen, and as soon as he goes in with a new hen, he goes crazy, man. That's the best looking gal I ever saw in my life. And he's dancing and singing up and down the cage and across the cage. Now we're going to get into where we're going to show you what we're here about. That's the male shama, one of the male shamas. That's the female sitting on a nest. She built that nest in 2.5 days. We use cocoa fiber for building the nests. Also, on the diet on our birds is on attachment A, and I don't have a slide of that. I thought you would have proceedings here, but evidently no. If anybody wants a copy of that, I'll be very glad to email it to them. I've got some copies in my folder over there. First come, first served could have them. Softbills are not easy birds to take care of and manage. It's not just chopping up food because you think they need vegetables and feeding seed because or pellets or whatever. We feed soaked cat food, soak cockatiel pellets, both the fruit and the breeder, and Purina Laena game bird chow to dry it up. These things are soaked overnight in the refrigerator, and then they're brought out of the refrigerator and they're defrosted and they're mixed. And the Purina Laena, which has been a source of bird food for ever since I was a little boy, is used to kind of dry it up and make it into a friable condition. In other words, if you squeezed it so tight with your hand to make a ball, the minute you put a little pressure on it, it would break up. She's on eggs, and they sit very tight. And if you really wanted to, you could take a wild one of these, and I'd say within 2 months have them taking mealworms out of your hand. That's how friendly these things are. When I feed the crickets, they have babies, they get crickets, I feed the crickets. She's there now. And I mean, she is there. She's almost at my hand. That's the box the nest is in. Most of them will nest in a box like this. I have one hen that's nesting in an open container up higher. Most of them nest down low at about 2 feet. There's a baby with his mouth open. There's a baby coming off the nest at 12 days. Their tail is about 1/4 inch long. And you have to get these things off the ground. The shamas, the insectivore birds, unlike the bulbuls, aren't as good a flyers the day they come off the nest, even though they're about the same age. The insectivore birds have a harder time flying. The pekin robins, the shamas, and robin chats. So if they were in the wild, they'd be in low growth forest. And so there would be branches for them to get up on. Well, if you have them in a flight, you want to provide those branches. I do the pruning around the house, and I did the pruning, and I saved a pile of branches, stripped all the leaves off it. So when these come off the nest, I put those down so that the first day or so they can roost off the ground. If they don't, and they get damp, and they don't reply to the parent's signal to feed, in other words, they don't open their mouth, they're dead. You only have to do that once or twice. There they are, older. That's a good-looking bird. They look just like the mother. They don't look like the male. They molt out on their first molt to look like what sex ever they are. I do not have these DNA'd or surgically sexed. I hold on to them before I sell them to make sure what sex they are, but not only to make sure what sex they are, to make sure that they're very viable, robust birds when I'm handing them over to their new owner. These lay 2 to 3 eggs. They're olive colored. About 14 days incubation, 12 days on the nest. That's one of the snowy robin chat's nests, very similar to the shaman. There's their eggs. That's one pair. That's another pair. That's a day-born hatched chick. And if you notice, this pair had a lot of moss in the nest, so that they made their nest out of the coconut fiber, and then they picked the moss off the floor and just inserted it in there. There's 2 babies hatched, and they hatch within 12 hours of each other about. I'm a Snoopy aviculturist. A little background, I've been doing this since I was a little boy, about 4 or 5 years old. I want to know when the eggs that my birds lay are fertile. If they're not fertile and it's their first clutch, I will let them incubate what is supposedly the incubation period. Like these, it would be 14 days. So that the hen knows she's supposed to sit 14 days. On a natural basis, she wouldn't sit much more than 10% or 15% of what the incubation period before she threw the eggs out. Any nest after the first clutch, if I don't see blood vessels in that 3 days, I might wait another day, but they're gone. There's not no blood vessels the next day. There's the same babies. And to me, there's nothing cuter than a thrush, and basically these are in the thrush family. When they come off the nest and they're moving around in the aviary, I think they're just one of the cutest little birds there is. That's just off the nest. It's not a good picture, but no tail. It's about 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch long. See it? See the tail on that bird? There's one of the parents. The bulbuls. White-cheeked bulbuls. Sally's the one that talked me into go back into breeding these things because there was a good market for them. And don't get me wrong, I love the birds. They're neat birds. Same thing. They're about 12 days incubation. They come off the nest 10 to 12 days. The difference between the bulbuls is the young will basically stay together. You see how the young are right here? They're huddled together on the perch. If one's going someplace and stays there for any length of time, that's where the next ones are. They're right with them. There's one on the nest. And on their defecation, I did that nicely, didn't I? On the defecation, all of these birds defecate into a mucal sac. And the parents carry that mucal sac away from the nest so that the predators don't know that there's babies up in that facility there. They can't, And those babies will sit down just tight as hell until something lands close to that nest, and then they'll put their heads up. That nest will be that clean for years and years and years. And talking to Joseph from Singapore, he says when he hand raises his shamas, he'll sometimes take them off at 6 or 7 days, and they still need something to cling on to when you take them off to hand raise them. Otherwise, they'll get sprattly. So you put little branches under there. And he says if you have a problem that they're still not defecating in a mucus sac, he says make sure they get more branches to be able to. So as soon as they grab onto those branches, they will start re-putting it into a mucus sac. Spotted eggs. Neat little birds. They're not flamboyant, but they're neat. I'm a birdaholic, so. Sally and I kind of talked about this a little bit today, but whenever my birds are coming off the nest and the parents, and I do like my parents to raise their birds, especially if it's some first-time breeders or something like that. I like to see the parents raise them. That's what was meant to be, unless you're having problems. I put this 1/2 by 3 wire over the water dishes. So if the baby lands on it, it's not going to get all wet and then drown. Take it off in about 4 or 5 days. By the way, on those Shama thrushes, I went so far as to, one day I went in there and I said, I've already lost 2 clutches and I don't want to lose any more this year. So I'm going to take them off and hand raise them. And took them off, put them in the brooder, the parrot brooder, in a container. And I thought to myself overnight, didn't get much sleep that night, I don't want to hand raise these things. They're a pain in the butt. And so the next morning at daybreak, I mean daybreak, I went out, took the babies, put them on the floor with the parents, and they went right back to feeding them. I have done that with 3 pairs of Shamas. Not a problem. They can't, if they're on the ground and there's a lot of dampness, and this is with most softbills, same thing with Pekin robins, they will not bake and you'll end up losing them. These are the red-vented bulbuls. These are also loose in Hawaii, by the way. Same type of nest, open nest. I will buy baskets. I get all my food dishes from the Goodwill. I don't think I have ever bought a food dish from a pet bird dealer other than the automatic seed feeders that are plastic, plexiglass. And I buy the baskets at Goodwill, mainly because I'm cheap and I like to save money. But they work. I will attach, when I set a pair of birds up, I will attach, this here is a plastic bamboo basket. I'll attach one, and that's a phony Christmas tree. And I don't use any real foliage in most of them anymore. I use ficus trees and phony Christmas trees. And then I'll make the boxes like you saw with another basket in there up higher. And I give them the choice. The bulbuls, the white cheeks, one time we'll use a nest down low and the next time use a nest up high. I guess I just learned how to press the button. Huh? There's a baby just come off the nest. Notice how short that tail is. And give you an example. Those white cheek bulbuls, if they lay an egg, if she lays an egg on the 1st of June, those babies will be off and eating by themselves by the 1st of July, and she'll have another egg. And she will do this clear into some years into November, they'll do it. There's the Cardinals eggs. You notice how they use it? They use the material from the phony Christmas tree in the nest with the coconut fiber. I can't express how important fine grass and coconut fiber is for these birds. It's just, if you can't get coconut fiber, go to a mall where they have Mexican hair grass and talk to the people taking care of it. Ask them when they prune it. And when they prune it, be there with old seed sacks and stuff those sacks because that's valuable grass, valuable material. There's one next to a brilliant diamond dove, yeah. Their head's darker colored until they go through that first mold. There's a baby with its parents. These are birds that we probably could be doing better with. Most people could be. They're loose in Hawaii, and I know I could be doing better, but I don't feel so bad because the zoos have done a lot worse. So And the reason why I say that is I know that these were brought in by the zoos from Hawaii to breed and repopulate the zoos that wanted them. And they were brought in about 6 years ago, I think 6 years ago. And basically the production's been nil. Normally they lay eggs very, very easily and incubate very, very easily. It's raising the babies, and you don't want these to where you can look in the nest. You got to be very, very careful because they'll desert a nest in a whim. That's the female of this pair. There's the babies. These were, when I got these from Houston, they told me, well, breed them in, I got 2 pair. Breed them in a colony. Because, they're colony breeders. Well, I guess they are. That's what the book says, at least. I did. I tried them in a colony, and each pair went and laid eggs, and each pair was unsuccessful. See how long that tail is? And they are sexually dimorphic. The males have more white on them. I love shrikes. When I was a boy, a man brought in a shipment of birds. He was just retiring as a merchant marineman, and this is in the Bay Area. And it was 1952 or 3. He brought birds into the United States from every continent in the world except for Antarctica. And he had so many species of shrikes, and I had never seen them before. Never seen most of them since. But their shrike is a meat-eating songbird. And they're very vocal. I believe they could be taught songs, taught to mimic songs. There's the hen on the nest basket. You notice, if I could operate this, I could probably. You see, that basket's attached to a piece of wood. It's attached here on a hook. I like to check those eggs, so I can take that basket right off the wall by taking it off of that screw and handle the eggs and know if they're fertile, and then put it back up. And most birds, the only birds that I know that have a hard time with that are pekin robins. There's the eggs. There she is looking out. Baby just hatched. Just off the nest. They take longer to hatch, and they take longer to come off the nest than the other birds that you've seen. Babies and parents. Like I said, with these, we've only had infertile eggs, and we've only had them about a year. But they will be bred in 3 foot by 3 foot by 2 foot cages. Male taken out when the hen's been setting for about 5 days. These here, pileated finches, or black crested cardinals, or whatever you want to call them. Not pileated finches. Yeah, there's a nest. When I bought these birds as a group from a guy in Florida that had been breeding them. Didn't know how old they were. And I said, I'm going to send you the money for all the birds. I said, I don't want you to sell them anywhere else. I'll pay for all of them. But I want the nest. I want what you bred them in. And he sent me the nest. I've never seen nests built like these nests. And they're they're very small nests. Nice little nests. See the baby right there? Very small. I would hate to raise one of these from day one. My God. Interesting bird. Very nice bird. Here's the food dish. Bobo, Finch, Softbilled mix. The wife does the feeding of all the softbills. I do the feeding of all the lories and the other hookbills. I manage all the nesting. We talk about decisions to move eggs, to foster eggs, do things like that between us. She's a very good aviculturist. Here's a fruit eater softbill dish. That's the typical striped corvid dish. Lots of mealworm, beef heart in it. We buy beef heart by 25 pounds at a time, and we have it chili grind, and then we break it up and freeze it into about 1 pound containers. This here, before I retired, you have a lot of problems with insectivore birds raising the babies. This is an automatic feeder. Oh, thank you very much. This is an automatic feeder, and it's operated by that set of batteries. It has 5 stations, and this is the only brand of automatic feeder that you can set for whatever time within 20. If you want to do it every 2 hours in a 24-hour period, it'll set until it's empty. All the other breeders, if you set it for 10 o'clock today, it's not going to move until 10 o'clock tomorrow and 10 o'clock the next day. This is the only one that does this. I had 8 of these, I think. In fact, I still got 2 that are brand new. And if you're working and you're away from home, I would come in, I'd wake up, I would go out and feed the lorries, and I'd feed the softbills, and normally that was about 6, and I'd fill these things up, head to work, and by the time I came home, they were empty. I set them about 2.5 hours. They were empty, and I'd start feeding live insects again. We feed about 10,000 mealworms a week. We're feeding during the breeding season. When they're feeding babies, we're feeding 2,000 crickets a week and about 250 waxworms. We do not feed a lot of waxworms because waxworms will pull the calcium away from the bird, and you'll end up having problems with the bird. This is the aviary. This is 15 flights in the softbill area. We have an automatic watering misting system. Visual dividers on most all the flights. That's the hallway. That's the door. That's a feed tray right there. And when you go to feed, you slide that plastic plexiglass door up and you feed there. And then down at about this level, this was taken right after it was built. Down about this level is where the lower feeders are for the insectivore birds, and it can be pulled out right from the outside. We also have platforms there. We have seed there. We have all kinds of food there. There's containers with a dry mix, because we have a dry mix in front of all the softbills 24 hours a day. And then, of course, the wet mix is fed fresh every morning. And then if they have babies, now they get fed live food at 6, 9, 12, 3, and 6. And I'm talking about basically crickets, because there's always some small mealworms in front of them at all times. Sometimes, if you don't mix up those mealworms so they see them moving, they don't really realize they're there and they won't touch them. And I've gone so far as to put maggots in with the mealworms. And they won't necessarily eat the maggots, but the maggots keep moving. And by them keep moving, they stir the mealworms up to keep moving, and then the birds see the mealworms. There's where we feed. This is looking out. Since then, I put that shade cloth down the front because I had sharpshins and coopers hitting the wire. In fact, they got one diamond dove right through the wire. And when you see that, it doesn't make you feel too good. This is our bird kitchen. All the dishes are washed here. All the lorry dishes are washed once a day. When they have babies, they're washed twice a day. All the dishes that are fed to the softbill birds get washed once a week. And when I say washed, I mean washed in soap and soaked in bleach water. This is the seed bins and so forth. Behind that window is a quarantine room. That's the Mr. System. That's the Mr. System on the lorry room. This room is part of the lorry room. These are some of the 3x3 cages in there, and they're hung right on the wall. They're about 1.5 inches away from the wall, so that something drops in back of the cage, it goes directly to the floor and doesn't sit there and mold and so forth. This is the first lorry room. Right now this room is close to about 39 years old. And these are the lorries that are bred in the 3x3x2 cages, and then over here is the flights. The floors for the flights going out this way, and there's 12-foot flights. That's the end, folks, and I appreciate you hearing. Are there any questions? That's a laughing jackass bird. Otherwise known as a kookaburra. Yes, ma'am. They're not like waxbills. They're not like the finches. A bobo will probably live 12 years. The larger birds are going to live longer. Shamas they have a good life. Shamas will have a good life. They'll live 20 years. I've had shamas at 15 years producing babies. Yeah, at 15 years, and that bird lived to be almost 20. Because I feel that my birds, once they've produced for me, I don't want to sell them if they're no good anymore. They deserve a good home. They did for me what they were supposed to do. Anyway, so we have a lot of non-producers at the house, especially in the lorry families and some of the hookbill birds. Because, for instance, if I get a hookbill bird and I've lost its mate, I'll be right there. I will have Scott sex it and tell me whether it's viable. And if it's viable, I will offer it as whatever age it is and tell the person that Scott checked it and it's viable. I have a black cap lorry she's no longer viable and she has kind of a growth. And he says, if you mess with that growth, you're going to lose the bird. Well, she will have a home till she dies. Yes, ma'am. The Strikes are meat eaters. They get the beef heart, mealworm. They're like barbettes. They love, when the mealworm turns into that white grub, they love those. They go crazy over them. Like I said, Strikes are a favorite of mine, no matter which species. And I've seen Strikes that were 6 inches, 5-6 inches long. Right. Oh yeah. The gentleman asked if they don't regurgitate. Is it the same with fruit eaters too? And it is. It's the same thing. Basically, they do not regurgitate when they're feeding babies. The Taracos, when they have babies, they take that fruit and they eat a lot of fruit directly from the food dish to the baby. No, I mush it up. That's what they have us for. Isn't that right? Any other questions? I really thank you for listening.
And on behalf of American Federation of Aviculture, I'd like to present you your speaker plate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This is a very good picture. Harvey? Thank you.
It was excellent.
See, that's yours.
Yep, I love it.